Whether you're thriving or barely surviving, abuse, addiction, and codependency issues can hit you at any time in your life. How do I know? Because my own wounds and issues continued to sabotage my success until I woke up one day at my version of rock bottom, abused and depleted by yet another narcissist. While the lessons I got were painful, they put my life and purpose here into perspective. Hello, loves. I'm Morgan McKean, intuitive empath and abuse survivor, and I'm here to give you the tough love you need to make a full recovery. Have you ever been in a toxic or abusive relationship? Or been involved with a partner who didn't show the right amount of empathy or remorse when they demonstrated bad behavior? My guest today on Tough Love with Morgan, named Julie, reached out to me on Facebook to tell me about her marriage to a potential narcissist, her struggles with codependency, and love addiction. And for those of you who are not familiar with what love addiction is, it's the process that happens when you're involved with someone who's a little less than savory and love bombs you, then punishes you later. Julie, thank you so much for being on Tough Love with Morgan today, and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Morgan.
So why don't you tell me a little bit more about your story so that our audience knows quite what happened with you?
Where do I start?
Well, when did you first sense that there was something off? Before you married him or after you'd already said, I do?
In reflecting back, I always think there was probably some issues all along, but I never really got any glaring alarms. There were certain things that I didn't like, and it was just kind of dismissed. And it's like, oh, that just comes with a long-term relationship. But he always behaved the way we think people should behave.
A little too perfect?
A little too perfect, a little too smooth. Attentive when he wanted to be, very attentive. Like the first 2 years we dated, I had flowers delivered to my office every 10 days, trips, things like that. Always kind of, just very smooth.
Basically, it was a little fairy tale-ish, which is actually very common with narcissism, or if you suspect that that's what the problem is they tend to do something called love bombing, which is called creating a happily ever after or a false future. So he gets you all the flowers and he does all of this, but clearly you can tell something is a little maybe too perfect. So it's off, because let's face it, none of us are that perfect. Not a single one of us would be flowers every week and letters every week. Like, that's someone who's clearly got an agenda, who wants something. But we'll just say you didn't know that at the time.
Right.
So he gets you to say, I do. Is he still acting perfect at that point?
No, it shifted a little bit after we got engaged. It was when I first started noticing it. And then when we got married, shifted a little bit more, but it's just kind of like became a little bit desensitized, I think, by that point. We were together almost 4 years before we got married. So I think I was just kind of got used to who he was.
And what do you mean used to who he was? Because it sounds like the behavior is a little off and that you were just accepting it, which we're actually going to get into why you were accepting that little offness but in just a minute. But I'm curious for you, what caused you to keep going?
I was married.
Oh. Okay.
I was married. That was my husband, and I was married, and I obviously loved him. And yeah, just that sense of commitment, definitely.
Okay, and I understand that, because a lot of us are taught, that once you get married, it's marriage for life. And if that's what you've been programmed to believe, then that's exactly what you're going to believe.
Right.
So you're in the marriage and things aren't quite going the way that you want.
Right.
There's obviously a tipping point that makes you say, okay, I've had enough. So what did you find out, or what did you discover? Because there are flags before marriage while you're engaged.
Right.
There are flags afterwards. So you're still staying.
Right.
You're not leaving. You've already seen that something isn't good for you, but you're choosing to stay.
Right.
So what is the final tip that says, okay, I've had enough?
The text message.
Text message.
So I was at home at a random time during the day, during the week. He was coming home from work to leave to go to a business trip to Europe. And I walked past his phone, and up comes this message
Oh no, we all know you never ever leave your phones open. Come on, whether you're on the good side of this or the bad side of this, folks, we do not leave our phones open. And no, I'm not trying to help the abusers or the cheaters, but come on. So okay, you get one of those famous texts that you weren't supposed to see.
That, you know, have a good trip. I miss you already. I love you.
And it was to
him, of course.
Okay.
It wasn't to me.
Of course not. So you see the text on your husband's thing that says, I love you. You know, clearly he's in something with somebody else.
Obviously.
Okay. And at this moment, what happens with you?
Rage.
Rage. Very common experience.
Yeah, rage. And he walks into the room. I hold the phone. I'm like, who is this? With very flowerful words.
Colorful kind that we won't want to repeat on TV for little ears.
No. And he typical behavior. I have no idea who that is. Somebody's playing a joke on me. I have no idea. And just, I was like,
deflect.
Absolutely. So I said, well, then call it. If you don't know who this person is, why are they sending you these messages? Call the number. He's like sweating bullets. And he starts calling. I'm like, oh, no, put it on speaker. And
very, very nice. Ladies, take note. If you find yourself in this situation, she's giving you the 411. You make him call the number on speaker so you can hear what's really going on.
Unfortunately, it went to just a generic voicemail, but still said, I have no idea who this person is. They must be playing a joke on me. And like I said, he was leaving for a business trip to Europe, and his coworker came at about that time, and he looks me straight in the eye and says, I have no idea who that person is, and leaves for Europe.
And so is it this moment that you see this, that you're like, okay, I'm done? Have you finally taken enough hits? Have you finally, seen enough behavior that you're like, I'm done? Or is there more?
Oh no, I stayed for 3 years.
Okay, and that's pretty typical, which is part of what I want to talk about. So that's the area that I want to talk about right there, because what she's talking about is very indicative of something called trauma bonding, which we're going to get into. But I want you to make note, even after finding the text message, even after years of abuse, she still isn't ready to let go. And that's because a love addiction is forming called trauma bonding, which we're going to get into in just a minute. So 3 years, that is a very long time to be with someone that at this time is literally doing something behind your back. Like you can't, it's obvious. It's literally in writing, black and white for you there.
Right.
And you're staying.
Yes.
So you're now responsible. You are no longer a victim at this point.
Absolutely.
I mean, he's at fault, but you are responsible for yourself. Okay,
Right.
so 3 years. What's going on in this 3 years that you're not out the door?
It kind of went back to the 2 years before we got engaged.
Love.
Flowers all the time, very expensive jewelry, expensive trips. If I wanted to go somewhere, went. If I wanted to go to Paris for the weekend, we'd go to Paris for the weekend. And it was everything I said I wanted. If I asked him to do something, he would do it. But I knew he was still lying and not engaged in the relationship. And then I was like, this is as good as it's ever going to be, and I'm miserable.
And so finally, you just had enough one day. There was no big climactic reason.
I just said, I'm miserable. I have to leave the situation.
Okay, so this is actually very common for somebody in Julie's situation, because we don't really talk in our societies too much about love addiction. We talk about drug addiction, alcohol addiction, food addiction, work addiction, but to be addicted to a person, that's not really usually commonplace or common knowledge. So what Julie's experiencing, as I mentioned before, is something called trauma bonding. And trauma bonding happens during the intermittent punishment and reward system set up by a narcissist. And if you have codependency issues, self-esteem issues, which, let's face it, about 90% of us do, because about 90% of us were raised in dysfunctional households, you are susceptible to this trauma bonding. So what Julie is describing in the beginning, or as you were saying, he love bombed you and went back to that for 2 years. That is the reward system. So what is happening to you in that moment is he's lighting up your dopamine, your Oxycontin, and your body, which is a chemistry set, is now becoming physiologically addicted to him. But here's what's the very interesting part. When you were talking about him cheating on you and things not being quite right, what was also being set off in your system are chemicals to the opposite. So you're creating the craving of the dopamine, the Oxycontin, and you're going after that, working twice as hard for the addiction. Because the hit is never the same. The first hit is the best hit you're ever going to get. Just like the love bombing in the relationship, that first little pocket, that 2 months or 2 years, right. Best it's ever going to be. But what happens in your mind is you remembered that good time. So when you were married to him and you stayed, you were like, oh, but I remember when he was nice to me.
Right.
And so what he did, which is what normally happens in these situations, if the person wants to stay, not all of them want to stay.
No.
But if they do, what happens is after they've abused you, is they go back and they re-love bomb you again to suck you back into the process. So not just for Julie, but for those of you who are watching, there are 4 stages to narcissistic abuse. And it's love bombing, devaluing, discarding, and hoovering. And all of them Julie has experienced in her relationship. And I hate to say it and be a little in your face, but the reason you stayed is codependency issues.
I know that now.
Of course, but that's also what you're healing from. That's why you find yourself here today. The biggest part that happens to us during a narcissistically abusive relationship is we lose ourself. So even if you had decent self-esteem, maybe a little codependent, because like I said a minute ago, most of us are, but you had a little self-esteem. The thing is, the narcissist targeted you because you're amazing. You know, obviously you guys wouldn't know in this conversation, but I got a little backstory on Julie. She's a college professor. She's traveled the world. She's a successful woman. All other parts of her life, as you know, would indicate healthy, happy, confident self-esteem. But let this little opening be here and let the narcissist come in and you're now susceptible, just like any other drug. So back to the time where you're in this 2-year period or 3-year period, excuse me, that you're staying. What is going on in your mind that is saying, I'm willing to deal with this thing over here that I'm ignoring? What was going on for you? How were you justifying? Because for every choice we make, there's a payoff. You know, you go eat fast food McDonald's and you think, oh, it tastes good in the moment, and don't worry about how your body's going to digest it later. Why? Because it tastes good in the moment. So there was a payoff for you to stay in that 3-year period instead of going, dude, you're cheating on me. There's a text message, you're cheating on me.
Right.
You didn't leave.
I didn't leave, and partly, not partly. Why did I stay? I was distracting myself. So like I said, there were a lot of trips, there was a lot of travel, there was a lot of distractions. And even at that, I said, you're cheating on me. And he continued to deny it. He continued to lie. He continued to tell me that I was making it up, that I was overreacting, that I should be over it by now. And so that combined with distractions, I completely distracted myself. And when I left him, people were like, but you seem so happy. You were going on all of these trips. And I said, the trips are merely a Band-Aid. It was a distraction to keep me there, as long as I stayed.
So you didn't have to step into a new life, is what you're saying. You didn't have to step into an identity. And that is the biggest reason people stay stuck in their addictions. Because in order to move from it, you have to claim a new identity and let the old one die. And that is where people find themselves here with me. They're ready to let the old version die because it's caused them so much pain that they're done. You know, the universe or God, they whisper to you, then they talk to you, then they yell at you, and then they drop a brick on your head. And like Julie, the brick was, I know he's cheating. I'm still sitting here. I'm here, and I will distract myself because I don't want to claim this new identity. So as of now, if you wanted 3 parts of you back that you had prior to him, what would they be?
Oh gosh. One, being able to trust, obviously. How do I want to say it? Well, obviously it's just like kind of like this self-confidence myself.
Okay.
You know, I feel like it was just taken from me and was just such, you know.
So trust and confidence. Mm-hmm. And what would be the third one?
I don't know.
Okay. Okay, so we'll work with those two.
Okay.
Because that's the main reason that we're all here, right? We want to work through our issues. So the first one about trust is before we learn to trust other people, we need to learn to trust ourselves. And lots of times when we've been abused in a narcissistic relationship, we don't trust ourselves because someone was lying to us. They lied to us about their job. They lied to us about their fidelity. Right. They lied to us about everything. And yet we still continue to move forward in those situations. So what the first thing isn't about trusting other people, though you might think it is, because we think, oh, I can't trust those other people because they hurt me. That's not the truth. You can trust whoever you want if you can trust yourself to make the right decision for your best and highest good. So what you're really dealing with right now isn't trusting other people, though you may think it is. It's about trusting you to get out when someone's hurting you. Right. It's about trusting to get out when the yellow flags. It's about trusting that you will not walk back into a situation like that, or that should you encounter, because there's 7 billion people on planet Earth, you are going to encounter some more narcissistic people, sociopathic people, or just people who aren't happy or glad with their lives. So they're going to affect you. When you learn to trust you, that you know you will make the decision for your best and highest good, it doesn't matter what anyone else around you thinks or believes. You just have to know, I know, should this person in front of me cross my healthy boundaries, right, I'm done. Or I may give one chance, because we are human.
Right.
And I will look and see what you did because I now trust myself. You don't have to be perfect. You can make a mistake. I trust myself to say, I can see what that mistake was and I'm okay with it, or you crossed my boundary and I love me and value me enough to move on. Again, if you find yourself in a choice or a decision-making place and you don't know what choice to make, I have a golden nugget question that you may want to write down right now. And it is this. Anytime you're faced with a big decision, take a moment and pause and ask yourself, if I really loved and valued myself, what choice would I make here? And the elevation of the thought that comes to your mind will automatically help you, support you in making a best choice for yourself, right, which will also help you trust you. If you know you will make a choice that is in your best and highest good, then you don't have to worry about who you're engaging with because you know you will put yourself in the safe place away from them. So that's issue number one. Right. Issue number two, about the confidence. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I did, because I have also been the recipient of narcissistic abuse, is there's an exercise that I've given to many clients. I'm going to give it to you, and it really shifts your perception. So you know your insides. No one knows your insides but you, or until you teach them how to treat you. So what you do is you pretend, you kind of visualize in your mind, do kind of a little meditation for yourself, and you visualize yourself walking into a room, all dressed up to the nines for you, confident for you, whatever that looks like, because you've had confident moments. I know you have. We all have had confident moments. So we know what confident moments feel like. So you close your eyes, put yourself in your best gear, look amazing, and see yourself, visualize yourself walking into a room and greeting people and interacting with people. When you see that, your confidence rises because you realize that's me when I'm not hindered. That's me when I'm not broken. That's me when no fear-based thoughts are in my mind. And that can now be me when I'm interacting with a narcissist who wants to deplete me. You don't have to give your power to them unless you choose to. And that's what happens. If you're codependent, that is what's happening. You have been taught that your value and your identity is coming through the validation of others outside of you instead of internally. And that's why you find yourself here. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to name your third one for you unless you've come up with it by now.
I haven't, but I wanted your opinion on the third.
The third would be to roll into where confidence comes from, which is codependency. And codependency is a theme that riddles everybody with any kind of addiction because it's part of our programming. It's what we were taught. It is the dysfunction that we were raised in where our parents said, you are not okay on your own. You are only okay if I tell you or if you behave the way that I want you to. And so then what happens is you duplicated this pattern in your husband. You chose someone who taught you the very same programming that was taught to you as a young person, because our intimate relationships are based on our intimate relationships. Family is familiar, and what becomes familiar to us, we duplicate. So the codependency is a starting of going through autonomy, confidence, and using things like the visualization that I just gave you as a way of going, wait a minute, I get to be who I want. I get to raise myself who I want. I get to show up in this life how I want, which means you don't get my power. Because here's the most amazing thing that no one ever told you about all of this. Narcissists pick people because they shine like a diamond. They pick the most empathic, animated, emotionally available people so they can extract supply. So if you find yourself being abused by a narcissist, or you find that they're taking advantage of you, congratulations. That means you're probably a really awesome human being. But if you don't claim your power, you will end up in a situation like Julie, or quite personally, me. I've been there. So I've walked the walk, and this is the truth. If you learn to love and value you, you don't have to worry about anybody else, because those who also love and value themselves are the ones who will show up in your life. And once you figure all this out, you never have to worry about a narcissist again, because while they see you and may wave hi, your energy will be so much higher than theirs, they can't touch you. Sound good?
Sounds fantastic.
Do you have any questions today about what we've talked about?
No, I don't think so.
You feel complete?
I feel on the road to completion.
That's awesome. And for those of you who are also facing the same kind of things as Julie is, with the confidence, with codependency, and with learning to trusting, I promise if you use the information that I just gave you, or you check my website later for any resources that might be available to you, I promise we will get you on the road to recovery so you can be happy and healthy again. And if you want to be a guest on Tough Love with Morgan, you can reach out to me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Morgan B. McKean. That's Morgan B as in butterfly McKean. And until next time, I hope you have a fabulous week.